Cool. Hello, everyone. This is SIG-cluster-lifecycle on the 29th of August, 2017. 3 days away from code freeze, is that right? Yes.
Correct.
Exciting. Okay, so probably crunch time. Yeah, if people have agenda items they want to bring, then please add them to the list. Currently, there's just a few things that I've added. The main item, I guess, is the second one that I added to the agenda, which was, I thought it probably makes sense to try and go through all the pull requests that self-hosted upgrades depends on, because that's one of the features, at least the main feature that I'm interested in, making sure that we get into 1.8. Before that, the question that I had was, so we talked about this a little bit in one of the more specific meetings where we were doing the sort of SIG-cluster-lifecycle goals meeting, and we talked about whether or not to turn on self-hosting by default in 1.8. And our tentative conclusion was, no, we should not turn on self-hosting by default in 1.8 for kubeadmin. The reasoning for that, as written in the agenda, is we think that self-hosting that we're happy with is going to land at the last minute. And last time we did a release, kubeadmin broke kind of badly, and so we want to make sure that we don't do that 2 releases in a row. Otherwise, we'll probably start having people think that we're shipping unreliable software, and we don't want people to think that. And we actually don't want to ship unreliable software. So on the assumption that there are probably going to be bugs and issues, the conclusion was to gate self-hosting behind a feature gate, but also to publicize it widely. So to try and do a blog post and an announcement that invites users to try it and give us feedback on it, so that we can get eyeballs and testers on self-hosting in time for when we really need it, which is the 1.9 cycle, where HA is going to depend on, or at least the version of HA that we support by default out the box is going to depend on self-hosting. So yeah, that's the idea. Does anyone disagree with that conclusion? Because now would be a good time to talk about that.
If I recall correctly, the reason that we really wanted self-hosting was to make upgrades work. Right, the most important thing was for us to get upgrades implemented, which we thought would be sort of easier to implement or better done with self-hosting. And I think it turns out in retrospect that was not the case. And we do have upgrades landing, that will be in 1.8. We'll have an upgrade command, even without self-hosting. And so I think that in the sort of the priority stack rank, that sort of bumps self-hosting down a little bit. I'm definitely okay with it. It's slipping to not be on by default.
Cool, yeah, and just to clarify, the kubeadmin upgrade command that Lucas and others implemented works with self-hosted and non-self-hosted clusters. In the non-self-hosted case, it will just upgrade your static manifests, which works in single master scenarios, but won't work in the future in HA, or won't work as well. Yeah, in a self-hosted case, it will do a self-hosted upgrade. So yeah, we kind of get the best of both worlds, hopefully. The only thing we need to be a little bit careful about there is that we might end up with this sort of bifurcation of different configurations that our users are running. But that's kind of happening anyway, because there are different flags you can pass to the commands, and you can use a config file to say what kind of thing you want. And you can always take a non-self-hosted cluster and turn it into a self-hosted cluster by running the relevant phase command.
And we were planning on doing that at some point in the future anyway, during one of the upgrade cycles. And so I think we were going to have a split mode of self-hosted and non-self-hosted for a while, and try to sort of merge those together into all self-hosted somewhere down the road. So I think that's not actually that much different than what we thought we were going to do. Just when we set the default and sort of get more people over on the self-hosted side, it'll be a little bit later.
Cool. one thing we should make sure we do, assuming we go down this path, is we should announce that we plan to turn self-hosting on by default in 1.9, so that we get sort of kind of like a deprecation warning.
Yeah, I mean, when we did our SIG update in the wider community meeting, when I gave that a couple of weeks ago, I announced that we were going to do it in 1.8. So I think we should just make it clear that slipped to 1.9. But I think people sort of assume, or I think some people at least realize that that's coming. We should also make sure that we update SIG PM, which I guess is next Tuesday morning. I'll let them know, and update the feature issue to be clear about sort of what's happening with the 1.8 release.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. So does anybody think we should turn self-hosting on by default in 1.8? Now is your time to speak. And I assume that SIG AWS is probably Justin, but it's worth checking. Forever hold your peace. Okay, cool. It's not going to be on by default in 1.8. I should get one of those little judge hammers. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I made a probably incomplete list of PRs that need to land in time for 1.8 to actually get self-hosting working reasonably well, even though it's not going to be on by default. Please, if people notice things I've missed or think these are the wrong links, please shout. Otherwise, shall we just go through them one at a time? So the first one is the daemon sets surging rolling update strategy. Does anyone know what the status is on that?
Hi, it's Diego. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey.
Great. Yeah. So it's written. We thought we kind of had discussed it enough and didn't need a design doc, but got a lot of pushback. So went back and wrote a design doc, and that's been discussed. And so the plus side is that there's nothing really big that's going to be different about the implementation. The downside is that the design doc is still not yet, fully approved by someone on SIGApps. So we need to complete that before we can actually continue getting the PR approved. So yeah, if someone has a sway with SIGApps, the current blocker is just to get the design doc, rubber stamped, and then we can move on to getting the PR reviewed and merged.
So given that we have 3 days before code freeze, does it seem likely that's going to get done? Like, who on SIGApps are you blocked on? Is there a particular person we can go poke?
Yeah, Janet Kuo, I think, was our original point of contact. Liggett as well was reviewing it a bunch. I think one of those two would probably be the approver.
Okay.
Does anyone have close personal relationships with any of those people, or like happen to work down the hall from them?
I can talk to Janet. I don't quite work down the hall, but I can get her on chat.
Cool.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, if this doesn't land before Thursday, then like we probably don't even want to. Well, we probably want to heavily caveat self-hosting in our docs, because my understanding is that it means that self-hosted clusters won't survive reboots, and that's not something we want to give anyone. Cool. Yeah. So, Robert, I'd appreciate it if you could take point, like you said, to chase that up. And I'll check in with you tomorrow, I guess. Is there anyone else who can help us get that over the line? I guess a related question is, what do we actually want to ask? Do we want to say, please review this quickly?
Yeah, they've already reviewed. I think there's just a couple open questions that I'm waiting for someone to say, okay, yes, option A or option B. And then I can very quickly fix up my PR and just, I don't think the reason why we didn't do design doc is because I don't think the PR is all that fancy. So, again, maybe famous last words, but it could be smooth if we just get unblocked.
Yeah, it sounded to me like the blocker was just getting SIG apps for view bandwidth, both on the design doc and the code, and that the code was largely implementing what we'd sort of verbally agreed to before that, and just sort of in the details we need to get agreement to get it merged.
That's right.
Okay, cool. So fingers crossed. That's great. And Diego, thank you for driving that. I really appreciate that.
No problem.
Cool. So we then have Lucas has been doing a lot of the implementation work, and he's away at the moment. Conveniently, he's away until the day after the code freeze, but that's okay. His initial PR got broken up into a bunch of sub-PRs. Who was reviewing those PRs? Anyone on the call today? I think Tim was reviewing some of them. Does anyone know the status on those PRs? I can go and look. Oh, okay, so at least one of them got merged. I guess Lucas maybe finished everything before he left?
Yeah, Lucas sent me a note on Friday, I believe, like Friday, my time, saying that basically everything was LGTM'd, and there might be one thing he had to rebase when he got back, but that it was pretty much all should be getting in. So okay. I haven't checked in more detail since then.
Cool. That sounds good. Fingers crossed. Are there any? Do you happen to know which thing it was that might need to be rebased? Just so that I've got a link.
Let me see if I can find it.
Okay, great. Maybe just pop it in the document under the section "Others to Do" link to them, if you could. Thank you. Okay, then the other PR is docs. I think docs PRs technically don't have to get in before the feature freeze. Yeah, so Mr. Hausenblas, your docs PR.
I'm working on it. So I thankfully got the review from Lucas before he said goodbye, and I just need to do the work. And,
awesome. Okay. Do you need any help with it, or are you happy to take it?
I'm happy if someone other than Lucas, like he knows this stuff, yeah. Right? If someone else, maybe someone who is not that familiar, after I've addressed his issues, has a second look over it, kind of like, ideally someone who hasn't used that at all, someone who's totally like a real alpha beta tester who, could really give deeper insights about what is missing, what is like something that we just implicitly assume people know and might trip people or whatever. So once I've done that, beginning next week, having someone else volunteering to give it a try would be awesome.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. I'm happy to do a pass over it. I know I'm a bit close, although I haven't actually been doing much implementation work, so maybe I qualify. Maybe ping me on Thursday, or okay. I'll make a note for myself to take a look at the current.
Or as I said, I'm all week next in London. Maybe we can also meet up somewhere.
Oh, that would be cool. Nice. Okay. Yeah, ping me. Just ping me on Slack. That sounds good. Cool. And yeah, if anyone else also wants to take a look, then please do. We don't just need one reviewer. Okay, yeah. So kubelet checkpointing. Thank you, Robert. You're paying attention. What's the status on that?
So Tim also mentioned in Slack that he's out of the office at the moment, and it looks like the PR is not merged, the one I linked to. I don't know when Tim gets back or if he's planning on being able to push that over the finish line, but that was one of the other things we'd written down as sort of a blocker for self-hosting was checkpointing in the kubelet.
Yeah, I actually that's what I thought we were talking about at the beginning, but obviously wasn't. But that my comment about like not surviving a reboot. This is the PR that means that self-hosted clusters can survive a reboot, as far as I understand it.
Right. The daemon set surges so that we can survive an upgrade.
Yes. Which is more fundamental. Yes. Yeah, so does anyone on the call know status on this? Tim said 4 days ago, thanks for the feedback, I'll update ASAP.
Yeah, it's not promising that it doesn't have an LGTM, it's not approved, and it needs to be rebased.
Okay.
And Tim said he's out of the office this week, which doesn't sound good for getting it in by code freeze. So it kind of looks now like the thing that Diego's working on, we might be able to push over the finish line. But if the thing Tim is working on, if there's no way that's going to get in, then self-hosting is going to be pretty sort of severely compromised in the 1.8 release cycle.
That would be sad. Very sad.
Unless someone else has bandwidth to pick up the PR and try to push it over the finish line.
Any volunteers?
We could make lemonade out of this and describe the design that we are planning on, because I think the issue, and like link to the various pieces of that and explain how it's going to be in 1.9 is going to be great or whatever.
That's a phrase I haven't heard before, make lemonade out of it. We can just take this cluster management system and make lemonade out of it.
It's trademarked now.
Is it really? Okay. Yeah. Does anyone have like contact details for Tim? It might just be worth pinging him and finding out what his intent is. Do that in a non-accusatory way. Just check in with him. I might try pinging him on Slack. Although if he's away, then he's away.
He was updating Slack this morning, so he might still have access to chat, even if he's not actually working.
Yeah.
I would try that first. If not, Joe should be able to get. Joe would probably be the best person to be able to get a hold of him.
Cool. Okay. Righto. Well, in that case, I guess everything else, release notes, blog posts, demos in the community meeting, hinge on whether or not we can actually land the feature. So let's just try and get in touch with Tim and poke people in SIG apps and ask them nicely for review bandwidth, and all cross our fingers. And yeah, if anyone does feel like they can pick up the kubelet checkpointing thing on the assumption that Tim is not able to push it over the line himself, please shout here or on Slack or.
Yeah, I mean, Justin also has a good point. Like if we get the feature merged right after 1.8 gets cut and it's going to land in 1.9, we can still describe how it works. We can still do demos. Like we can still show it working, even if it's not in the shipping software.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also landed a feature to make it easier to install pre-release clusters, right? Something like that.
Yes.
So we can have easier instructions for users on how to try the functionality. And we would therefore still be able to invite feedback by showing people how to get it. But yeah, it would be a shame though if we can't actually. What we are going to be able to do is still land the upgrade command, even if we don't land self-hosting, because the upgrade command can work on non-self-hosted clusters and hopefully provide a good UX. So we can get the UX like tested and feedback on the UX for upgrade. Worst case. So
yeah, and like I said earlier, I think that's more important. Someone asked in chat, by pre-release, do we mean CI build or something else? And I think the answer is both. You can upgrade to an alpha or beta sort of official cut releases or to a CI build. And I think part of the reason that was put in was so that we could do testing of kubeadmin against CI builds as part of our continuous testing infrastructure. But it was also like the UX around it was put in so people could actually upgrade to an alpha or a beta cut and actually test those prior to release.
Yeah, but the alpha betas, it was already like a long time ago. It was possible to do it.
Okay, maybe that was already there. I know Lucas was doing a demo showing it in the UI. Maybe it's just friendlier to get to.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's everything on my points. Does anyone know of any issues okay, I haven't really been tracking anything apart from self-hosted upgrades, but I do know that there's a bunch of other stuff that's landing for 1.8. Is that right? Or no, not much?
Yeah, we can go take a look at the features repo and see what we're signed up for.
Yes, that would be a good idea.
Lucas was out also asking me in chat if we thought the multi-architecture support should be labeled as beta in 1.8. So that's sort of related to cluster lifecycle. It's not clear that it has a good SIG home, but that is somewhat related. All right, so we have 11 feature issues for 1.8. So checkpointing the kubelet is one, so we talked about that. The daemon set surge update, we talked about that. There are 1, 2, 3 for cops, which we haven't talked about. I'll come back to those. We have extensible configuration of kubeadmin, which is also supposed to hit beta. So that's the kubeadmin phase command. We've got upgrades with self-hosting, which may not work, but we have upgrades without self-hosting if that doesn't land. Better multi-platform compatibility, which is what I just mentioned. So this is Lucas's description of this is be able to create a cluster where you have heterogeneous nodes where some are running PowerPC, some are running ARM, and some are running AMD 64. It's not clear to me that's quite done, but so we'll talk about. It's basically a labeling thing. Do we call it beta or do we keep calling it alpha? Better bootstrapping and discovery, and I think we did have some of the discovery stuff land. Out of process controller managers for different clouds. That is, I'm not sure if that's exactly how close that is, but it's definitely getting closer. And then add-on management, which Justin, you can comment on. We had targeted that for alpha, and I'm not sure we quite made it to alpha.
No, it keeps going round and round in design. I think there's a new design out there from Brian Grant, so hopefully that will drive more consensus.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. I just put a link to what I think is the thing that you were looking at there, which was the features repo restricted to SIG-cluster-lifecycle issues with a milestone of 1.8. Oh, yeah. Pretty much the same URL. I think slightly different order of arguments. So, cool. That's really helpful. Thank you, Robert. Should we move on to the other items on the agenda?
One last thing on that. I should mention, if any of those issues are assigned to you, if you could go put an update on them before next Tuesday, because I assume, I haven't been to a SIG PM meeting yet, but I assume at the SIG PM meetings, we will sort of cover that list, especially at the next one, which is right after the code freeze, and sort of talk about what's actually landing in 1.8. So anybody who owns those issues, updates would be appreciated. Otherwise, I'll just be inferring from the state of the repository.
Cool. Okay, Jacob, you have the next item.
Hey, so I've been hosting these knowledge sharing sessions for our end-to-end test infrastructure. Yesterday, I just gave the second session, and I think based on the content left, we probably have one more session to do. So I'm just advertising that it will be in 2 weeks approximately. I forgot to link to the issue. I'll put an issue in the notes where I've been coordinating availability. Yesterday, I wasn't able to record the meeting, but the next one should be recorded, so you don't have to worry about being there in person, although interactive questions are always great to drive the useful content. And the output of this exercise is not only the videos and notes and all of that, but a document that hopefully someone will be able to read and parse and understand how the whole test stack works and how to do different tasks, like how we set up new end-to-end test variants or how to debug test failures from our end-to-end tests. And so this last session is going to be mostly focusing on making sense out of test grid, how to actually run the end-to-end, our kubeadmin end-to-end test locally, and how to debug failures so we can triage when the tests go red. So just a little advertisement there. I'll also put a link to the issue if anyone is interested in attending, just schedule availability.
Nice. Thank you for running those. And were they recorded?
The first was recorded. Lucas volunteered to record it, and then I didn't realize until way too late that he wasn't able to make yesterday, so there was no one there to record it. But thank you, Luke. I now have permission to record myself, so I can record the next.
Excellent. Yes, and as you said on chat, it would be great if we could find a way of granting that permission without sharing a shared password. That's more of a infrastructure of the Kubernetes project question. Can we figure out how to do groups in Zoom? Anyway, I just remembered that as Robert was going through the list of features in the features repo, that we skipped over the COPS features and didn't come back to them. So I wanted to ask if Justin, you wanted to go through those?
Yes, so we are obviously not bound by the feature freeze date, being a federated project. I think that we will probably get 2 out of the 3, but I'm not willing to commit to which 2. But I think, yeah, we're looking good. Continually bound on pull request bandwidth more than anything else. So it's very difficult to actually forecast these things. But we have most of the pieces there. So
I was going to ask about that, Justin, since you guys are divorced from the 1.8 release cycle. Is it worth tracking the COPS sort of features with the Kubernetes feature milestones, or is that just extra overhead for you guys? It's not valuable.
So when I asked this, the answer is that we are the front runner or the canary that, yes, we have to be in the features repo if we want to be considered for, documentation or the release notes or anything around a release. And so, yes, it is a shortcoming in the process that, that we're sort of tracked in the same system, but are not following the same rules.
Okay, so there is value to you guys. That's what I was trying to figure out, is whether there's actual value to you or whether it was just extra process without value.
It is extra process. The value is unclear.
Okay, hopefully it'll be clearer after 1.8.
Yes.
Cool. And for those who don't know what those 3 things are, do you want to give a brief?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the one of them is bringing GCE support from alpha to beta. The big blocker on that is just figuring out, making sure that the the GCE cloud objects that we create are stable. And we know that one of them is not what we want in terms of the networking configuration. There's a newer, better networking configuration. We are using the old, traditional networking configuration, and we want to fix that before we declare it as sort of stable. Everything else sort of, we can fix as we go. But changing the network settings is a pretty disruptive event. So that's the big blocker for going to beta on GCE support. Another one of which is COPS server, which is a Kubernetes API server using the Kubernetes API machinery. We have early versions of that. We are continuing to put more objects into the API, like our cluster secrets and things like that. And so that is going well. We have a branch which can basically run with COPS and actually create a cluster from a server, not using a controller, but still using the COPS CLI. So that's progressing. It's not going to be complete, but it's progressing. And the third feature is support for bare metal. And again, we have a branch in a more experimental state, but we're getting there, and likely we'll tie that to the server. And yeah, it's more progress on it, I think, is slow and steady progress on the server and bare metal.
Awesome. Sounds great. I've just been chatting with Tim, by the way, and he says regarding that checkpointing PR, he's not sure who would be able to pick it up. and he thinks that effort would be better spent on focusing on end-to-end tests and upgrade tests, I suppose. His summary was, we should rally our efforts on testing, in his opinion. Seems fair enough. If we don't have anyone putting their hands up to say that they're going to try and take that PR over the line, then I don't know what else to do, really.
In that case, should we ease off a little bit on Diego's PR for SIG apps and let them focus on getting their stuff into 1.8? I mean, if we don't have checkpointing, then how hard do we want to push on getting other things in if we're still not going to get self-hosting out of it?
Well, so I think the using your summary earlier, with the surge stuff, you can upgrade a self-hosted cluster without getting stuck. You then can't reboot it, but you wouldn't have been able to reboot it before you upgraded it anyway. It might still be worth trying to get the upgrade of self-hosted clusters working that much so that people can test it and test the UX. So I personally would err on the side of not giving Diego a break, but it's also kind of up to Diego.
Well, yeah, it's also up to SIG apps. I mean, I guess the question is like, how much do we want to push them? Because presumably they have other stuff they're trying to land before the release freeze also. And if this isn't sort of the last thing to get us to self-hosting, do we want to sort of burn some of our friendly capital on getting it in or not?
I think that's a great question. I think my take is that it seems to me like there's an incremental piece of value to be gained. It's not huge. And also it's not my friendly capital that would be being burned. So yeah, I think we should try and take a view on it though.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I'll still talk to Janet. I'm just trying to figure out how hard to push.
Sure.
Just as a quick check, remind me, is kubeadmin cannot use deployments for the scheduler and the controller manager for some reason? Is that still true?
I think the fallback plan was to switch to that if we didn't think that the surge strategy was going to land, but we didn't really leave ourselves enough time maybe to switch back. Because I mean, it looked like we had agreement, all the code was going to get in, and then we got a little bit sidetracked with the design doc. So, which is not. I mean, it's understandable from their point of view.
Yeah, interesting sort of cross-sig dynamic, I suppose, which this probably isn't the venue for contemplating, but yeah, definitely scope to improve there. But anyway, that's fine. So anything else on the agenda? Jace.
Hey, so I just wanted to give the PSA to let's look at all the issues that are outstanding for cluster lifecycle in the 1.8 milestone, just so we can get clear signal on if we've got any blockers for the release, because all these will be considered release blocking as soon as we hit code freeze. So if you can just burn down those things, that would be supremely awesome.
So we have someone speaking in the background, or whoever is speaking. It's hard to hear you.
Sorry, I share the office with my wife.
No problem. Okay.
Yeah, so we just need to burn down the issues. That's all. And I put a link in the agenda.
Cool. And just from my understanding, what exactly do you mean by burn down?
Meaning that they either need to be resolved or taken out of the 1.8 milestone.
Got it. Thank you. Cool. So, yeah, please take a look.
As we remove things from the 1.8 milestone, do you also want us to rip them out of that release notes draft, or will the SIG release team handle that?
So, yeah, you'll have to actually remove those because we won't know. And these issues, just to be clear, are things like bugs and other things that we're looking at for the quality of the release. So if there's something that comes up as a bug that you think should hold the release off, that's kind of what we're trying to have in the 1.8 milestone. So essentially, by the time we get ready to cut the release, there shouldn't be anything in the milestone that is not release blocking, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. Cool.
Luke, since we have 20 minutes, do we want to take a quick pass over that list?
Yes, that sounds good.
We can narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah, cool. Do you want to lead that?
Sure.
Thanks.
So I just removed one. So the one that was assigned to Tim, I bumped that to 1.9. So there are 11 left. We'll just go down in whatever order they appeared on my screen. Hopefully it's the same for everyone else after following Jace's link. So first one is enable the Bootstrap Signer and Token Cleaner controllers by default. Lucas says it's needed to get something to beta. I thought that we did that, although that looks like there is an open PR from 29 days ago that has not been merged. So it looks like that is maybe not done. And Lucas is out. So it's not clear if that's, I mean, it's been a month. It's not clear if that's being pushed forward. Luke, do you know if Lucas is still chattable while he's out, or is he completely off the grid?
He's on a school trip, so I'm not sure. I think he's on mobile, yeah, so he's probably pingable on Slack.
Okay. So second one is to update some of the GCE shell scripts to remove some deprecated flags in gcloud. It looks like at least one PR emerged for that in the last day. So I think we should keep that one in the 1.8 milestone. It looks like Jeff Grafton has been pushing that forward, and he has not assigned himself, but he is sending PRs for it. So hopefully he continues to do so. The third one is about 1.6 to 1.7 upgrades. Network partition test failed. Let's see, that's assigned to Janet and assigned to both SIGs. And Jacob, you commented last on that 6 days ago.
Yeah, so it got punted to cluster lifecycle because someone detected an anomaly after upgrading the cluster that it looked like it wasn't set up in the same way that a fresh cluster would be set up. So I root caused that problem, and that's fixed now. So now it's kind of back on them. We should unassign our SIG because it's purely their failure at this point, is my understanding of it.
Excellent. All right, we're off the hook on that one. Perfect. All right, API server timeouts after rolling update of etcd cluster. So let's see. This is assigned to API machinery and cluster lifecycle. Jordan is commenting on it quite recently, and it's not clear exactly how this person installed or is trying to upgrade their cluster. So I think we should probably, if someone wants to take a look at that offline, it's probably not worth all reading that together. Next one is EDE tests for Cloud Controller Manager. So this is related to splitting out the Cloud Controller Manager from the regular controller manager, which was one of the feature issues we talked about earlier. And we bumped it to 1.8 3 months ago. And I don't see a whole lot of progress since the end of May. So I think this one, it's assigned to our SIG because there isn't really a better SIG to own the separation of the Cloud Controller Manager. But Siddhartha is owning that one, and I think he's still on the hook, so we should ping him to see if we should bump it. The next one's about RBAC enablement. CJ actually just sent a pull request for this, I think yesterday or the day before. So we'll leave that there for now until we decide if that PR is going to make the code freeze. Otherwise, we'll punt it. Cube add-on update revamp. This was opened a really long time ago, my mic. Brian's been updating it with random links. I think not gonna. This is not gonna land at 1.8.
Yeah, I think we punt that. It's just gotten more complicated, not less complicated.
All right, so move cube proxy into what Damon said. So this is something that Zihong is working on. I think he's at the point where he believes we can add a flag to do this optionally in the kubeup scripts, but not turn it on by default, which to me is a little bit concerning, because the reason I wanted him to do this was because we're already doing this in kubeadmin, and some people on SIG-node and SIG-network think that it's not safe to do on GKE yet, which makes me concerned. And I've been trying to get them to fix the underlying issues to make it safe for them to consider doing it in production, so we can do it everywhere and make it consistent. Basically, SIG-network is owning that, even though lots of SIGs are tagged on the issue. So I think we should leave that there and let them decide whether or not to triage it out. Next is key/cert rotation for clients, which Eric Toon opened almost 2 years ago and has not been updated in the last 3 months when I bumped it from 1.7 to 1.8. So it's assigned to Jordan and Jacob Simpson, who both work on auth. So I'm going to take our SIG off of that and let them triage it out. The next one is kubelet checkpointing or something. So this is very similar to the other one that we just bumped out of 1.8, because Tim's PR is not going to get in. We'll bump that to 1.9. And the last one is support high availability clusters. And that was a P2 for 1.8, which we didn't quite get to. We believe we have some designs, and we'll get to it at 1.9. So I'm going to push that to 1.9 also. So we're now down from 12 issues to 6, at least one of which, maybe 2 of which are owned by other SIGs, but we're still tagged on, which I think is okay, because hopefully the folks in the other SIGs that are assigned will decide whether or not to keep those in the milestone. So hopefully that helps, Jace.
Awesome. Yeah, he just said, woo, thanks, grin. So, yeah, good. Amazing what you can do in a few minutes.
Yeah, well, we should probably do another pass as we get closer to. So.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, good.
Cool. Alexander asked in chat if someone could review a PR since Lucas is out. I don't know if people saw that.
Yeah. So yeah, if anyone's looking for things to review, PR 50840, please take a look. And Alexander, if you want to also drop that in the meeting notes, it might get more visibility.
Okay, I will.
Cool. Is there anything else that people want to add to the agenda? I guess I have a lingering sort of thought, which is that Tim suggested that we think about rallying our efforts on testing. What does that actually mean, and what can we do in that direction in the next few days and weeks?
Jess isn't here, but she is taking on the upgrade tests, at least according to the old upgrade procedure where you do kubeadmin init again with the same flags in the new version. And he did mention rallying efforts around testing upgrades. I'm not sure if he mentioned anything else, but we have pretty good coverage now. The problem is that we still need a human to look at the test grid on an occasional basis and notice when things are red and then jump in to help root cause what's going on. This has mostly been a few individuals, and we've actually found real regressions that aren't kubeadmin lately. Like the kubelets had a few regressions that we've had to push back on them. So I've been hosting the knowledge sharing sessions to try to make it easier to farm out the knowledge and responsibility of being able to maintain this stuff. But if there are any other specific ideas or specific asks, that'd be great. Another great improvement that we had pretty recently was kubeadmin was only able to use the images from the control plane from the last alpha release or whatever, and now we actually have CI images. I believe, fingers crossed, I think that went in. So that means that we actually notice when things go red right when they go red instead of like 2 weeks later when the next alpha is. But,
yeah.
So we actually have really good test coverage at this point, at least from an end-to-end standpoint.
Yeah, I think the biggest gap, as you mentioned, at this point is that we don't have anything that notifies us when things break, and people have to remember to go look at the dashboards and see if the dots are all still green. But I'm looking at them now, and there are lots of green dots, which makes me happy. It's a little weird because the tests against 1.6 are serving no results. I don't know if we turned those down but forgot to remove them from test grid. But the ones on 1.7 and the one against master, those both look pretty healthy.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. I can dig into it and see if we disabled it for some reason.
The other thing that's happened on the last couple of releases, which is mostly been owned, I think, by Googlers, is trying to make the upgrade tests work in general. So we have kubeadmin tests, and we've got now we're starting to write upgrade tests for kubeadmin. But we also have all of sort of the legacy kube up-based upgrade tests, which are sort of much more thorough in testing Kubernetes upgrade functionality between versions. And they take a really long time to run and historically have been very difficult to keep running healthy. And it's been hard for us to get a signal out of them for the last couple of releases until very late in the release cycle. So if people are thinking about helping out with upgrade testing, that would be another place that we could use extra hands.
Awesome. Cool. And yeah, thank you very much for the summary, Jacob. That was really enlightening for me and makes me feel like we're in good hands. So,
has everyone seen our SIG cluster lifecycle tab on TestGrid?
Hey,
Robert was just looking at it, so maybe he can put a link in the notes or in the chat.
I'll stick it in both. Here's the in chat first.
Nice. And are we also now, so you said the limitation is that humans have to look at it. They have to remember to look at it. Do we have, I remember at some point in the past, I don't know how up-to-date my knowledge on this is, that there were kubeadmin tests that were failing that were not noticed when the release was cut. Have we also fixed that? Have we fixed that problem? Are there kubeadmin tests that block the actual release of 1.8.0?
I don't know if we've cut the release 1.8 branch yet. Usually we wait until the branch is cut because the way the tests get triggered are based on the branch name. But there is a new master blocking tab on TestGrid, and there's an issue to add the kubeadmin tests to it. I haven't gotten around to it, and I was kind of hoping someone else would be able to, because I have other stuff I've been trying to work on, but it's at least being tracked that we should be there.
Okay, cool. That's fine. Just good to bring that up. And yeah, volunteers welcome.
I would ask that we don't add that blocking to the blocking tests since we're so close to code freeze, unless it's absolutely necessary. But we can still track it closely in the release.
Yeah, I think the question was more about the release blocking tests, which we don't have set up yet. So there's the tests that are like release-1.8 that the test sort of burn down group looks at when we're cutting a release. I think the question was, can we get our tests in that TestGrid dashboard?
Oh, right. Gotcha.
Cool. Okay, any other questions, comments, concerns, or trivia? No? Cool, thank you everyone. And I'll see you all next week. Cheerio.
See ya.
Bye.